So we'll have a mini marathon today. We have 4 hours in a row. We usually prefer to have breaks like every 45 minutes.
Yeah.
So,
Something like that.
So we'll play with the breaks. We don't have to be very strict. We're going to cover today a few topics. We're going to start to talk about the brainstem, then we'll talk about cranial nerves, and at the end of this morning we're going to cover the topic of the ventricular system. Hello. So, first of all, we're in a small group. If you have any questions during the lecture or something is not clear, please feel free to stop me and ask a question. So we'll start in describing the external anatomy of the brainstem. But before that, just you have it. So the presentation is available on the Moodle website. Everyone knows how to go there, right? So these are my contact information. You have my email address in Tel Aviv University or in my other affiliation in Oxford University.
Ooh.
If you need me after hours, this is the phone number. I have an office in Sheba Medical Center, so you can contact me here or via email. And let's start talking about the brainstem. So you didn't learn anything about the brainstem yet, right? We started describing the hemisphere. Did you have the lesson about embryology yet, about the development?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. So until now, you described all of this region. The region that came from the telencephalon, right? You remember the embryonic vesicles. And in the telencephalon have a very specific structure. There's a cortex outside, white matter inside, and additional subcortical nuclei. So in here, you can see part of it is not visible when we're looking at the brain because it is covered by the huge hemisphere. But in here, you can see the structures that are built from the other embryonic vesicles. So in purple, you can see the thalamus. I don't know, you already had a lesson about the diencephalon?
Yeah. Yesterday.
So yesterday, it's very compact in here. I'm teaching the same class in the Sagol School for Neuroscience, and we spread the class until the entire year. So I need to say, you remember 5 months ago, we learned about the diencephalon, so everything is very condensed in here. Anyway, so you can recognize from yesterday the thalamus, and you can see, do you know what this is? This purple thing. All things that are, so this is a good opportunity to do like a rehearsal about it. So everything you see in purple in here is the diencephalon.
That's the hypothalamus.
Hypothalamus.
No, so the fornix, first of all, the fornix is a white matter structure, and is a white matter structure of the telencephalon would be inside here. This is the optic tract. It's a very weird way of looking at it, but the optic tract comes from here. This is the optic tract. Okay, this is the pituitary gland, the epiphysa. This is the hypothalamus and the thalamus. So these are the internal structures of the brain. This is not a part of the brainstem. Most textbook, there are textbooks that connects the diencephalon with the brainstem, but this is not considered to be a part of the brainstem. This is the diencephalon, and all of the green structures here are parts of the brainstem. So this part, the part that you can see it here. So this is a drawing. Obviously, we'll see pictures and we'll see it in the lab as well. This part in here is called the midbrain. Okay, we said the middle of the brain. You know what vesicle becomes the midbrain? Remember the name? Mesencephalon is a different way of saying midbrain. Mesencephalon is midbrain in Greek. Okay, mes, middle, and cephalon means inside the head is the brain. So mesencephalon is the midbrain. Beneath the mesencephalon, you can see in a different shape of brain, you can see the pons. The pons is the second section of the brainstem, the one you can see in here. The pons comes from which embryonic vesicle? Mesencephalon. And the third part is the medulla oblongata. the medulla oblongata, the long body or something like that. This is what you can see here. Comes from the telencephalon. Okay, so the telencephalon is getting very, very big in the human brain, covers all other vesicles, so most of them are not visible when we're looking for the lateral plane, but inside you can see the diencephalon, mesencephalon, metencephalon, and the anencephalon. It gives us the midbrain, pons, and medulla. You have it in here. You don't need to write down the name. And just to look at it in large, we'll cover all of these. I don't want to give you just the list. We'll do it slowly. But I just want you to see all these yellow things are what we're going to see later today are cranial nerves. Are a bundle of axons leaving the central nervous system and going toward the periphery. So all of the cranial nerves leave the central leaves the central nervous system through the midbrain. So at first we're going to look at the brainstem from the ventral aspect. So this image describes the brainstem of someone that looks towards you. Okay? So we're looking on the ventral side. Remember, you're familiar with these terms. It's not your first anatomy class, right? Ventra meaning from the side of the ventrum of the abdomen. Okay, so this is the ventral side, and you can see half a cerebellum. You didn't learn about the cerebellum here, right? You did.
We did.
So the cerebellum was cut from one side. You can see half the cerebellum in here and half of the temporal lobe in here. And in this drawing, there are a few missing parts in order for us to see the entire brainstem. So at first, I want to describe structures that are not belong to the midbrain, but to the diencephalon, just to have an overview of what we are looking at. So you can see in here, you recognize this part. It's much more easy to recognize it in here than on the green structure. This is the optic chiasma. This is the optic chiasma. We'll say more things about it when we'll talk about cranial nerve. This is the optic chiasma, and we can see the optic nerves coming from the eyes because they were cut. So you can see like a stem of the optic chiasma. This is the optic chiasma, and this is the optic tract. The optic tract is like hugging the midbrain. You can see the optic tract from both sides in here, covering the midbrain. This is the midbrain. This is already brainstem. And the optic tract covers the midbrain, and it ends in this area of the thalamus. This is the lateral geniculate body. You familiar with this region? Did you talk about it? So we'll mention it. Maybe we'll mention it later today. Just not to make it out of context. So the thalamus, when you look at the thalamus, it has a shape of an egg, something like that. And the meaning of the word thalamus is chamber, but it looks in a bit of like a bit of an egg, but it's not a complete circle. So you remember in the middle of the thalamus you have, I don't know how we call it. We didn't talk about it when we talk about the diencephalon, or you already forgot it yesterday. So we'll put it aside, never mind, but thalamus have a few nuclei that you can see externally. So there's a lateral geniculate body. This is the nucleus of the thalamus that involves in the visual system, and another nucleus that calls MGB, medial geniculate body, a medial geniculate body that involves in the auditory system. All of the visual information that comes from the eye, we'll talk about, I'll expand about it later today, but just to make it clear for now, all the visual information that comes from the eye goes to the lateral geniculate body. The name geniculate is because if we do histology and look on the inside of the nuclei, we'll see structures like this. Like, you know what the meaning of the organum? Like a knee. So it's a geniculate body, and is more lateral than the medial, so you got the name lateral geniculate body. So this nucleus is the end point of the optic tract. So we can see it in here. We don't see the entire thalamus because the thalamus is behind the screen in this drawing. This is the lateral geniculate body. We can also see we don't see the pituitary gland, the hypophysis, but you can see the pituitary stalk. This is the place where the pituitary gland is continuous with the hypothalamus, with the rest of the brain. You can see the mammillary body. Are you familiar with these structures? Mm-hmm. Okay, so just to know where we are. And this is the mammillary bodies, again, a part of the hypothalamus. Now we start describing all of these regions that are part of the brainstem itself. So at first we'll talk about the midbrain, the mesencephalon. So the midbrain start to appear just beneath the optic tract. And you can see these two large masses of white matter, these bundles. So this is from Nettel's atlas, this drawing, and each time it draws white matter, try to give it like a fibrotic look to make sure that to help us realize that this is white matter. So you can see this very large mass of white matter from both hemispheres. This is the cerebral peduncles. Cerebral peduncles mean the legs of the brain. When you look on the brain, it looks like the entire telencephalon is sitting on these two very large legs. So this is why it is called cerebral peduncle. And another term to describe them is crus cerebri. There's a small difference between these two terms. Maybe we'll talk about it later. Crus cerebri means exactly the same thing. Legs of the brain. This is a different way to say it in Latin. So this is these two very large masses. And the information that goes from the periphery up into the brain, mostly sensory information. And the motor fibers that go from the brain down to the periphery goes through these masses. Did you talk about it with Alon when you spoke about corona radiata, about fragile? Did you mention the cerebral peduncle? Okay, so these are the cerebral peduncles. These are the main. This is the main part of the midbrain that is visual from the ventral aspect. So cerebral peduncle of the right hemisphere and cerebral peduncle on the left hemisphere. Not to be confused with the cerebellar peduncles, which are the legs of the cerebellum. Okay, so it's very confusing. It's very unfortunate to write on an exam cerebellar instead of cerebral or cerebral instead of cerebellar. So it's cerebral peduncles. Okay. Yeah.
So is it just motor, or is it sensory and motor that goes through it?
Both sensory and motor, and there are other aspects as well. So there are connections. Between brainstem and the cerebral. So all of the connections of the hemispheres to things that are beneath the hemispheres will go through here. Well, there are other regions as well. Not all of them in here, but you can find a lot of them. So sensory information and motor information and connections between cerebrum and brainstem. Any other questions? So the next thing I want to show you here is that between these two cerebellar peduncles, there's a gap. This gap is called the interpeduncular fossa, not surprisingly. The fossa, the hole between the two peduncles. You can see it in here. This is the interpeduncular fossa. And you can see, we'll see it in a real photo later, but even in this drawing, you can see that this interpeduncular fossa, the substance inside the fossa is perforated. You can see all of these small holes. The reason why it is perforated is because there's very small blood vessels that goes inside deep nuclei inside the hemisphere through here. So blood vessels perforate this region, and this is why inside the interpeduncular fossa there's the posterior perforated substance. Are you familiar with the anterior perforated substance? You didn't talk about it yet, so I'll mention it just briefly. Each time you hear in an anatomy class about the structure that starts with the posterior, you need to ask yourself, so where is the anterior? Otherwise, it will just perforated substance, right? So if there's a posterior, it means that there will also be an anterior part. You can see it in here. Did you make the olfactory tract yet when you talk about the hemisphere? So maybe we'll talk about it later we talk about the cranial nerves. I can just show you in here. You can see another perforated substance in here. So this is the anterior perforated substance, and we'll elaborate about it later because it has nothing to do directly with the brainstem. So this is a posterior perforated substance, and keep in the back of your head that there's an anterior part as well. So posterior perforated substance inside the interpeduncular fossa, the hole between the two cerebral peduncles. Another thing you can see in the midbrain in here is that there are two cranial nerves that emerges out of the posterior perforated substance. These two cranial nerves. This is the third cranial nerve. So just say previous sentence about cranial nerves. So as you know, the central nervous system is connected to the periphery. It's not just a system that has interconnections to itself. So the connections to the periphery, to body parts, body organs, is through cranial nerves or spinal nerves. Spinal nerves are nerves that goes out of the central nervous system, out of the spine, right? And cranial nerves are nerves that leave the central nervous system through specific holes in the cranium. So there are 12 pairs of cranial nerves, 12 from the right hemisphere and 12 from the left hemisphere, 12 pairs of cranial nerves, and 10 of them leave the brain from the midbrain. 2 of them are unique, and we'll talk about them later on. So this is the third cranial nerve. Okay, so we won't mention the first and the second until the second period about cranial nerve, but this is the third cranial nerve. His name is the oculomotor nerve. Oculus means eye. Oculomotor, the name helps us guess the function. The oculomotor nerve involved in movement of the orbit of the eye. Okay, it's involved in moving the eye. There are 7 muscles that move the eye from side to side, and up and down. The oculomotor activates 5 of them. We can also see the fourth cranial nerve. The fourth cranial nerve, called the trochlear nerve. You can see it in here. It's a very thin cranial nerve. It goes out from the dorsal aspect. It goes from the behind, and it goes and circles the midbrain, and we can see the end of it comes to here. The rest of the nerve is going outside of the skull, so it's not visible here. So these are the main structure of the midbrain that we can see in the ventral aspect. Any questions about the midbrain here? Excellent. So the next structure of the midbrain is the pons. Okay, maybe we'll just write it down to have the structure. So the first division of the brainstem is into 3 parts. Right? The first part is the midbrain. The second part is the pons. And the third is the medulla oblongata. So now we'll clear. So let's describe the pons. So first of all, the word pons. The word pons is similar to word in English. So you know what this is? Everyone did Florence, I think. So this is Ponte Vecchio, right? In these days, Ponte means bridge. Ponte Vecchio means, you know the translation of it, the old bridge. So this is the old bridge in Florence. So the word pons is the Latin word for bridge. This is where the pons got its name from. So first anatomist that gave it the name thought about the pons that it looks like a kind of a bridge between the two sides of the cerebellum. So we have one hemisphere of the cerebellum here, the other one was removed, but it looks like a bridge. actually there are no axons, there are no fibers that go all the way from left cerebellum to right cerebellum through the pons. It's not actually a bridge. But when we try to describe the gross anatomy of the brain, this description fits. So the name pons stick, but it's not that there are fibers that go from here to here, just cross section of fibers. So this is the origin of the name pons, and what you can see in the middle of the pons. So again, you can see it here. So this is a real brain, not a drawing. You can see it here, the bridge like the bridge between the two sides of the hemisphere. So this large part of the pons, most of the part that is visible from here, is the basilar part of pons, the basic part of the pons, the main part of the pons. And I want to pay attention to this sort of a sulcus. Some of the texts will call it a sulcus. I prefer the term groove. You can see that in the middle of the basilar part of pons there's a groove. And did you talk about blood supply yet? No.
Yeah.
The basilar artery.
Exactly. So this is the location of the basilar artery. So if you remember, there's a lot of arterial blood that comes from both vertebral arteries and joined together to one large basilar artery. And the basilar artery that goes on the middle of the pons leaves its impression on the middle of the pons and creates this groove. So this is why we have like this groove or sulcus in the middle of the pons, and this is the basilar groove. We can also see a very large cranial nerve that goes out of the pons. This is the fifth cranial nerve. The name of it is the trigeminal nerve. I mentioned the names now because we can watch them, but we'll elaborate on each one of them later on. So don't panic about learning the names now. The trigeminal nerve got its name because it has three parts. This is why I call it trigeminal, although it's the fifth cranial nerve. Okay, so it might be a bit confusing. So this is the trigeminal nerve. And the trigeminal nerve marks the border between the basilar part of pons, the basic part of the pons, to the more lateral part of the pons. And the more lateral part of the pons, you can see it here, again this is white matter, is the middle cerebellar peduncle. So if you learn about the cerebellum, you know that the cerebellum is connected to the brainstem through three legs: the superior, middle, and inferior cerebellar peduncle. So this is the middle cerebellar peduncle that connects the pons to the cerebellum. And the border between basilar part of pons and middle cerebellar peduncle is the fifth cranial nerve, the trigeminal nerve. So this is basilar part of pons, this is middle cerebellar peduncle. Another thing that is very noticeable is that there's a very distinguished border between the pons and this part beneath it, the medulla. This border, this sulcus, called the pontomedullary sulcus. Okay, not surprisingly. The sulcus between the pons and the medulla. Okay, so this is the pontomedullary sulcus. And out of this sulcus, out of the border between the pons and the medulla, we have additional three cranial nerves. So we give them numbers from medial to lateral. So this is, so you remember we were in third cranial nerve, fourth cranial nerve, and fifth cranial nerve. So the most medial cranial nerve that leaves the brainstem through the pontomedullary sulcus is the sixth cranial nerve. Then we have the seventh cranial nerve and the eighth. And as you can see, the eighth cranial nerve has two parts. So all of it is the eighth. This is the seventh, and these two are two parts of the eighth. And I'll give you the name later on. I don't want to make it too confusing right now. So we had the midbrain, the pons, the pontomedullary sulcus, and now we'll go on to describe the medulla from the ventral aspect. So the first thing we can see in the medulla is that we have these two straight columns. these are also columns of white matter. So you can see, so as you already know, in the hemispheres, in the cerebral cortex, the gray matter is on the outside and the white matter is on the inside. And in the spinal cord, the other way around, right? The gray matter is inside and the white matter is outside. We can think about it as the cerebral cortex is interconnected and or even intraconnected, connected with itself, and the spinal cord is connected to the outside. So inside the brainstem, we can see this shift. So inside the brainstem, we're starting to see white matter structures on the outside, more similar to the spine as opposed to the cerebral cortex. So these columns are, again, columns of white matter. And the name of it is pyramid. And the origin of the name is, we look in cross-section later on. A cross-section through the medulla, in a cross-section through the medulla, it would look something like that. If we cut the medulla, so in a cross-section through the medulla, we will see that the pyramid have a bit of a triangular shape. Okay, these are the pyramids. So now we're looking at from a ventral aspect, but if I will do a cross-section slice, it would look like this, and this is why you got the name pyramid. Yeah.
Sorry, for the transition between where we have white matter on the inside in the cerebrum to the white matter outside in the spinal cord, where does the transition occur? Is it like a gradual transition, or is there like a demarcated line where?
So I would say it's somewhat in the middle, because it's not a fixed, it's not something that happens in one point. So it's more of a gradual transition. In the midbrain, we start to see white matter structures on the outside. The crus cerebri is a white matter structure, but we do have gray matter structures on the outside also. We'll see it when we see the dorsal part. And again, in the pons, you can see the middle cerebellopeduncle. These are white matter structures. It's not something you see on the hemisphere. When you look at the hemisphere from the outside, I don't remember if I have it. If we look on the hemisphere from the outside, you just see gray matter. So also in the pons, you can see white matter, and in the medulla, you can see white matter. So this is a transition, but it's not a complete transition, because as I'm going to describe later on, there are also gray matter. So this nucleus is gray matter, and this is white matter. So we have like a mixture of gray and white on the outside, and then on the spine is all white matter on the outside. Okay. So this is the pyramid. So any questions?
We figured it out.
This is a good description of the fibers that go through the pyramid. So do you remember corona radiata?
Yeah.
Fibers, these hand-shaped fibers goes from all hemispheres. So some of the fibers inside corona radiata are motor fibers that originate in the primary motor cortex and goes down through the internal capsule, right? Is it familiar in the same? Excellent. So I'm guessing if I see like 5 or 6 nodding heads, I'm guessing it's okay to continue. Or I did more bigger samples.
No, it's you.
That's okay. Okay. So motor fibers go through corona radiata and through the internal capsule. And the destination of these fibers are in the motor neurons, the lower motor neuron in the spine, in the ventral horn of the gray matter of the spine. So these fibers go through crus cerebri. We'll talk later on, and we'll have a different lecture about motor path. Also, they go through the pons in the middle. We can't see them; they're not visible anymore in the pons. But then all of the motor fibers are going through this region, the pyramid. And you might know that the corticospinal tract, the tract that goes from the cortex to the spine, is also called the pyramidal tract. The name pyramidal tract comes from this location, pyramid. Another a bit of a coincidence is that the neurons the pyramidal tracts. The neurons that starts in the primary motor cortex, you know the name of these neurons. The type of the neurons they called pyramidal cells because they have the shape of a pyramid. They have the shape of a pyramid, then a very long axon. So the pyramidal tracts are tracked with axons of pyramidal neurons, but these axons also go through the pyramid. So it's a very suitable name to give them to call this tract the pyramidal tract. So this is the pyramid, and motor neurons are going through the pyramid on the way to the spine, on the way to the spinal cord. And another thing I want you to see is this region in here. So you can see a very clear border between the right pyramid and the left pyramid in the beginning of the medulla. But as you may know, the motor cortex controls the muscles in a contralateral way. So the left hemisphere controls movement in the right side of the body, and the right hemisphere controls the movement in the left side of the hemisphere. So these fibers in here, in the right pyramid, the origin are the motor cortex, are neurons in the motor cortex of the right hemisphere that goes through the right corona radiata, and right internal capsule, and right crus cerebri. At some point, these fibers need to shift to the other side of the nervous system before they go to the other side of the body. So this is what happens in this point, when you see the border not that clear. This, just a second, this is called the pyramidal decusation. Okay, the way, the place where the pyramidal tract do this X-shaped move and move to the other side. Yes?
Can you repeat what you said? So neurons originating in the right
hemisphere
here.
Goes through the right corona radiata,
Okay.
and right internal capsule, and right crus cerebri,
Okay.
moves through the pons and goes to the right pyramid. At some point, these fibers need to shift to the other side in order to affect muscles in the other side of the body. And this point, the point where the pyramidal tract do this shift, this decusation, is in here. This is the pyramidal decusation. And you can see the border becoming a bit, I don't have a suitable word to describe it, a bit less clear, I would say.
Blurry.
Yeah, a bit blurry, exactly. So this is the pyramidal decusation. So the pyramid is the most medial structure of the medulla in the ventral aspect. You can see that there's another structure in here, a bit more lateral. This is a nucleus. It's not a structure of white matter. To go back to the question about the shift from white being in the outside or gray being in the outside, so this is the gray matter nucleus. And this nucleus calls the olive. I think it's pretty clear where he got his name. It's similar to an olive. Later on, when we look at the cross section, you'll see that it doesn't look like an olive at all. But this is the olive nucleus. The name came from the description of it from the outside. This is the olive nucleus. And it is built from two different nuclei. Inside of it, the inferior olivary nucleus and the superior olivary nucleus. I don't want to talk too much about them. So the inferior olivary nucleus is relevant to the connection with the cerebellum. If we talk about it when we talk about the cerebellum, okay, it's not that important for now. It has something to do with motor function. The superior olivary nucleus is more of an auditory nucleus, but we can't discriminate between the two of them when we look from the outside. This is the olive, or the olive complex. Just keep in mind that it is built of two different nuclei. So the third region of the medulla that we can see in here, even more lateral than the olive, you can see it in here, all the way here, beneath these cranial nerves, is the inferior cerebellar peduncle. So we had the middle cerebellar peduncle that connected the cerebellum to the pons. The inferior cerebellar peduncle connects between the cerebellum to the medulla oblongata.
The is that again?
This thing. So these are roots of cranial nerve, so it's not that visible. But beneath it, all of this, we'll see it better in the next slide. But in here you can see all of this. The most lateral bump. So when we look at the medulla, you see 3 bumps on the ventral aspect. You see the most medial one is the pyramid, the middle one is the olive, and the most lateral is the inferior cerebellar peduncle. And between the inferior cerebellar peduncle and the olive, between the olive and the inferior cerebellar peduncle, there are additional 3 cranial nerves. Cranial nerve number 9, beneath in cranial nerve number 10, and this is cranial nerve number 11. So all 3 of them leave the medulla oblongata between the olive and the inferior cerebellar peduncle. And the last cranial nerve, you can see it here, the 12th cranial nerve is between the pyramid and the olive. So the 12th cranial nerve is more medial to the olive, and the 9th, 10th, and 11th cranial nerves are more lateral to the olive. So these 3 are between the olive and the inferior cerebellar peduncle, and this one is between the olive and the pyramid. Okay? And as I mentioned a few times before, after the break we're going to describe all of the cranial nerves, so it's okay if it's not that clear for now. So let us look now. Any questions about the ventral aspect? About the ventral aspect of the midbrain. So maybe we'll go back to this drawing later on, but let us now look on the other side of it. So we're going to shift it to the other side and look on the dorsal aspect. So when looking on the dorsal aspect of the brain, looking from the back of our heads, we mainly see the cerebellum. And in order to describe structure of the brainstem, we need to remove the cerebellum. So this is why Necker did this drawing. Like this drawing, he removed the one hemisphere of the cerebellum and kept the other. Just something that might be a bit confusing that students sometimes mention. So this is the left hemisphere of the cerebellum. If theoretically these two are the same brain, we would have to see the cerebellum on this side, not that side. But never mind, it's just a drawing. Okay. So this is the dorsal aspect of the cerebellum. So again, we're going to describe diencephalic structures at the beginning, just to have an orientation where in the brain we are, and then we'll describe the midbrain, pons, and medulla oblongata, but now not from the ventral aspect, but from the dorsal aspect. So the first thing you can see here is the lower part of the thalamus. So the thalamus was cut horizontally here, but this is the lower part of the thalamus. Okay, so it's like they did a section over here. But we can see the back of this egg-shaped nucleus, and this is the thalamus. And between the two thalami, between the thalamus of the left hemisphere and the thalamus of the right hemisphere, we have this gap, a ventricle. We're going to talk about the ventricular system today, but did you mention it a bit at the beginning of the discourse? So this is the third ventricle, right? The ventricle between the two thalami is called the third ventricle. You can see it in here. Okay, so this region, and this is thalamus of the left hemisphere, and this is the right hemisphere. I don't want to mention the. Have you learned about the abenular tribe?
No.
No. So it's not a part of today's lesson. You can see it in here, but it's not very important to know how to detect it from this. It might be a bit confusing. So let us put aside the abenular tribe for now. But what you can see in here, this bump is a gland. This is the pineal gland. Did you mention the pineal gland?
Yeah.
So you know what the pineal gland is famous for?
Melatonin.
Yeah, so this is correct. So the right answer. I'm also giving this class for students that come from the psychology department, and they give a different answer. So, are you familiar with the philosopher René Descartes? You mentioned his name.
More or less,
Philosopher,
yeah.
mathematician, a very famous
Descartes.
researcher from the late 17th century. So Descartes. We say Descartes in Hebrew.
Descartes.
Yeah.
Descartes.
Yeah.
Descartes.
And the way you write it down has nothing to do with the way you pronounce it, so I'm not going to write it down.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
how do you pronounce it in English?
It's Descartes. It's the same way.
Okay.
No,
Uh,
Descartes. I've never heard
you
you
know
say
the famous
Descartes.
sentence, cogito ergo sum?
Speaks French.
I think, therefore I am.
Yeah, I think therefore I am. Exactly. So every time when people want to say something cliche about philosophy, they use this vague sentence, right? So Descartes did a lot of things, like this Enlightenment era, the post-Renaissance era. You could be both philosopher and mathematician and anatomist and everything.
As long as you were rich.
So Descartes had a lot of ideas about the pineal gland. No one will ask it in an exam about anatomy, so you don't need to write it down. It's just an anecdote. So Descartes thought that the pineal gland is the location of the soul. When he did a dissection of the brain, he saw that there's...
Doesn't it release DMT?
What's that?
It releases DMT, doesn't it?
What's that?
DMT, the spirit molecule.
What, the pineal gland?
Yeah.
No, it releases melatonin.
What about DMT? I don't know if it's just. Alright, never mind.
So, as far as I know, the only thing the pineal gland releases is melatonin, but I don't know endocrine. Anyway, so Descartes thought this is the location of the soul. He thought that it's exactly in the middle of the brain, and there's only one of it. And most structure of the brain is two of them. So for some reason, he deducted that this is the location of the soul. So it's for students from humanities, the pineal gland is famous because of Descartes' wrong assumption about the location of the soul. So I'm happy to hear that in the medicine faculty, you know that the pineal gland secretes melatonin, which is very important from the circadian cycle and for sleep, basically. So this is the pineal gland. The pineal gland is connected to the hypothalamus. This is a diencephalic structure, not a structure of the midbrain, but we can see it in here, so it's important to mention it.
What's it connected to?
To the hypothalamus. A few other diencephalic regions we can see in here. We can see the lateral and the medial geniculate body. These two nuclei I mentioned before. So these are nuclei of the thalamus. The lateral geniculate body is a part of the visual system, and the medial geniculate body is a part of the auditory system. And they are very clear. You can see that they look like bumps that goes outside of this more smooth structure of the thalamus. These two bumps. This is the lateral geniculate body, the more lateral, and the medial one is the medial geniculate body. Auditory information finds its way into here, and visual information will go to this one. Okay, lateral geniculate body and medial geniculate body. So all of these are in the encephalon, and now, like we did in the ventral aspect, let us describe the midbrain. So the first thing we see here is these four bumps. These bumps are called the tectum of the midbrain. We call it the roof of the midbrain. I'll elaborate in a few minutes why they are called the roof. Because when we're looking on, so maybe we'll talk about it now. So when we describe the nervous system of the human brain, we think of a specific orientation of the brain. But most vertebrates are tetrapods, are working on, have four limbs, and the entire nervous system is on the same linear plane. So if you think about the midbrain, the entire brainstem and the cerebellum, this side is called the roof, and this side is usually called the floor. But on our nervous system, where if you talk about embryology, talked about the cervical flexure, we have a change in orientation, and the back of the brainstem and the cerebellum are more, we call it dorsal because it's towards the back, but are more posterior than superior, and the ventral side is more anterior than inferior. So the terms comes from animals. So the back side is called the roof, and the front side is called the floor. Although if we would describe it in human, we would say back wall and front wall or something like that. So the tectum, so it's not very good drawing here. This is the brain of a rat, I think. It's more complicated than a rat. I think it's some kind of a monkey. Anyway, the tectum is in here. So the word tectum means roof. And this region looks like the roof of the midbrain. So in humans, it's not in the superior part of the midbrain, but the name stays roof. So this is the tectum. And when you look at the tectum, the dorsal view, you can see that it is built from four bumps. And another name for the tectum because of it is lamina quadragemina. Right? The lamina that has four bumps, and these bumps called colliculus. Okay? One colliculus and many colliculi. So these four colliculi are the plata or lamina quadragemina, which is the tectum of the midbrain. All of these terms describe the same structure. So these two are the superior colliculi, not surprisingly, these two are the superior colliculi, and these two are the inferior colliculi. And like the geniculate bodies of the thalamus, they are part of the visual and auditory system. So the superior colliculi are part of the visual system, and the inferior colliculi are part of the auditory system. The superior colliculi are connected to the lateral geniculate body, and the inferior colliculi are connected to the medial geniculate body. So the auditory colliculus of the midbrain is connected to the auditory nucleus of the thalamus, and the visual colliculus of the midbrain is connected to the visual nucleus of the thalamus, not surprisingly. So the way the superior colliculus is connected to the lateral geniculate body is through a brachium. Brachium means branch. We can't see it very good in here. We'll see it in the next slide because the medial geniculate body covers it. But from here, there's a small branch. This is the superior brachium that connects the superior colliculus to the lateral geniculate body. It goes in here behind the medial geniculate body. And not surprisingly, if we have a superior brachium, we also have an inferior brachium. And we actually can see the inferior brachium here. So this is the inferior colliculus, part of the auditory system. It is connected to the medial geniculate body through this inferior brachium. This is the inferior brachium. So the inferior brachium is more wide, but it is also more short than the superior brachium because the medial geniculate body is more close to the tectum because it is medial. So this is the inferior brachium, and the superior brachium is hidden. The superior colliculus to the lateral geniculate body. Any questions? You need a break.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is a good hour. It's already 8 minutes late.
Exactly.
So let's agree that this is a good sign for a break. Don't be shy to raise your hand and tell it. So we'll start at 10:25. Is that okay?
15 minutes?
Okay. Bit more than
Cool. Awesome. Yeah, it's good. I like him. I like him a lot. Very straightforward.
I got this.
Yeah, I love
He was all
What?
He was just like, this.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, these structures are more organized.
It's like, it's very like flowing.
Yeah.
It's like a
It
song.
does
Makes
flow.
sense. It's like, that's moving.
Lev is very, very theoretical. He really loves. He's like an artist, but I can't. There is no time.
When you have,
The
like,
abdomen like
Like 38
when you
tests
have
in a week.
2 lectures in a week and a half, there's no time for theory.
That's why I like the. I already forgot his name. Who's the other guy who did Lower Limb? Kenan. I liked him. He's
The
just
problem
trying
with
to.
Kenan is he had way too many slides up front.
I like
He did, but it's just like this. This is how
I
it
loved
works.
all that stuff. Like, I was like, this
Yep.
this one, what is this?
But I like this. This is like, this is a structure. This is what it does. That's it. No confusing this. There's no ambiguity. Like,
But when he
this
said
is
corona radiata, I thought of the ovum. Zona follicula.
Zona
Yeah.
pellucidum.
Remember the zona pellucidum? You have the corona radiata with like
Oh, you're thinking,
Oh yeah, corona radiata. I was like, oh, I know what that is. Ovary. No, I'm just
I
kidding.
remember how intense she was, and we're
the slides are pretty deep. Oh, I finished it.
You finish all of the summer?
No.
I was gonna do that and the questions.
What about the slide? The thing is, do you think you need to know problems and who to know? They said chapters 1 to 3 problems are mandatory. Okay, the classes.
But what about the first two ways?
Well, that one's just gonna be put out as a question.
I think the chapter 1 is
But we've also done like self-death and stuff before. Apoptosis, no one
It's a nice review. I was watching it. So
what?
the whole chapter on that was
Very stuff for me. Amsterdam. Not Pegasus, please.
That's like a head.
Well, Jordanian.
Where is it at?
Pegasus.
I'm sure it'll be like a lot of crowds.
Seems like a good time. A friend of mine took a picture with another woman from Orange is the New Black.
Oh yeah, I saw she was at her.
How did you see it?
It was on Facebook.
Oh yeah?
She, I think,
Yeah, friend took a picture of it.
really want to see her.
Well, she did.
That's crazy, though.
No. I don't know. That's crazy that she's there.
Yeah.
Well, they come on castle. So you have a specific
Ah, yeah.
lecture about that? Or
Yeah.
why-
We have it.
So I will ask you not to.
Oh.
Oh, okay,
Not
fine.
to learn about it, but it's not that complicated.
Okay, also, in terms of the price, the best way, the other person, the best way to start is for elections.
Yeah.
You suggest that
Yeah,
also?
yeah. So you have the suggested video. Advertising, yeah.
We have a pharmacology
Suggested.
and a pathology test on the same day, so.
And yeah, all.
And we're all doing it in 5 weeks, pharmacology, neuroanatomy, and,
It's intro to pharmacology, and I mean, it's not. It's just a very basic. It's superficial stuff.
Really? You think 8 chapters is basic?
What for what?
Farm?
Farm?
You could spend 8 years on farm.
Yeah, I think it is. I honestly, because we're gonna have in-depth pharmacology
8 chapters? That's basic.
next year.
I don't know, I like that. That's like the only one.
You could spend years on this.
If you know everything that they mentioned during the talk, so you'll be fine.
including
Yeah.
the card.
Yeah, I
Descartes.
they.
Descartes.
No, you're fine.
I'm from New York.
No, that's not how you say it.
No, you're fine.
No, I just wanted, you said it fast, I heard like, I don't know,
That's how
I
people
heard
in
something
the
completely
United
different.
States would say it, and it's wrong. Trust me, it's very
It's
wrong.
like a NASCAR.
Yeah, exactly.
Driver.
No, I don't put such a heavy emphasis on the day, it's just like Descartes. He did like deductive reasoning and some other stuff. I read some of the stuff.
See the highlights last night?
Crazy, they hit so many posts. So many posts.
Can't believe they're up 2-0.
Yeah. San Jose is good though.
They're a great team.
Yeah. The goalie's playing great.
College is just on fire.
Yeah.
Can't stop.
The Penguins were good this year.
They're always a pretty good team.
No, they sunk though. Like they hadn't.
They made the playoffs.
Yeah, but Fleury was always an issue now.
Wait, you got
The single mosquito bite.
Wait,
1, 2, 3, 4,
No way.
6.
Last couple of years,
There's a single one.
they're always
I saw
a good
briefly.
team when all their parts are moved. Like when
No,
all everyone's healthy.
I think I knew
they
they were
always
getting, I knew they were throwing
now they
it.
have
And I was getting bit. I knew it was warm. I couldn't find it anywhere. I woke up this morning, I saw it, I couldn't get it, and I couldn't find it.
Remember who else did? They got like I do like utensils. They have like
Someone keep my
tool
window.
very well.
I know.
We need a bit of free
I work in the theory that they don't want to come up that high. It's pretty high climb.
You gotta find a
And it usually works, but this one was.
Sometimes they'll like,
It's super nice, you know. It doesn't go for my normal tricks.
Eric Stoll is a
Turn on the
boss.
screen, get my
They're
tricks.
basically saying, it basically says at the end of it, like, you usually waste
It's mine.
Mine is he was like, this, I mean, they never got a cup, I mean, he was still, but that he never got a cup out of his, like,
I just realized how much material is on
like
this.
having a Hall-of-Fame style career. And then
I think it was
Yeah, it's crazy. I don't even like know it yet. Like, I've gone over all the material, but I haven't turned my own.
the problem is always that they just say sacrifice their future for
I like, you know,
for a cup run.
everything is there. Yeah, I found a lot of like kind of academic, especially like little Raymond, like going in and out. I kind of like follow, I can track everything. But it all starts in the same place. So that's no, so I asked the guy yesterday, he said it's like very basic lessons like San Jose, you know, can't make new memories. But
It's one of the best hockey players who gets all the time.
yeah, because like can't So he said that question. I was like, and Brian and I were talking about it. He goes, man, he goes, don't worry, we haven't lived in that part yet.
I just said like, every player on the roster, pretty much, and they said where they're at, like their contracts, every guy was like, you know what I'm playing this guy, this guy's
no, we're not. We might have won. What I'm saying is that.
So knockoff.
Maybe Dunkin' Donuts is a knockoff.
They're called Mr. Donuts. They're called Mr. Donuts. Yeah,
sometimes the newer thing surpasses the old.
How are they? No. In this case, no. That adage doesn't apply. No. No. They don't. First of all, they're kept cold. They're never fresh. Great Israeli donuts.
By the way, you sound some worse right now, which means you're doing better. You're doing cold, right?
I had
So, I said there's a great graph behind it. You know, like
yeah.
The worst I sound.
Usually, yeah, because the body tries to get everything out towards the end. Yeah. I'm trying to get rid of all the snot.
So, like, there's a graph which says, like, amount of sympathy I get, and so I have that the cold starting to sympathy.
No one believes you at the beginning.
Yeah.
Oh, you could.
Something's going around. I'm not the only one that was asleep.
That was incredible.
You were in the hospital, right?
One day, yeah.
Sorry to hear. What may I ask what happened?
Not that sure. I think it was a virus, like a stomach virus.
Rhoda? Noro?
Not Rhoda, norovirus.
Noro?
Shigella.
Khaleesi?
Absolutely Shigella.
I have a 9-month-old daughter. So it's like picking up viruses everywhere and makes me sick.
It's a good thing to develop.
Just trying to collect viruses.
So like,
It was not.
Well, I'm glad you're feeling better.
are we gonna have a break between the two classes, or are we just gonna go straight?
So the official idea was to do 45 minutes, 15 minutes break, like 4 times.
Okay.
This is the only way
We can get through all the material.
but I think we might do everything a bit faster. So we'll see, just give me the side.
Zalto was her first job.
Yeah.
I remember when I had my first job. We had so much trouble with where my place stayed. I don't think so.
Only one person in our class that was like 30.
I think it's coming up. Probably this month or not this month. We'll miss the breast.
Yeah.
It's a shame. I would have gone to 2 breasts. I'm on a roll, man. I'm on a roll.
How's your first breast?
That was my first breast, yeah. I think I did a pretty good job, so I think I'm going to try to go to one every month.
Yeah, you hold yourself.
Soon I'll become, what is it called? Yes.
Eventually.
Oh, yeah. No, it's funny.
I would learn it. I think I would learn it.
You'd go into it?
I would like, not as a career, but
A lot of doctors and women do it.
Yeah, there are surgeons.
Yeah.
Yeah, most people these days don't
They don't want to.
Right. Surgeons, okay. Because this particular piece that we attended brothers, they use their mouths. From what I hear, and I may be wrong, correct me here, that it's actually more common than not.
No.
I'm hearing conflicting.
It's common in both of those. Yeah, I've never been to a business where I can see it.
it's enough about ultimate luxury. And I guess it's starting to get
For us.
Yeah, but it's not like it's calculated.
This was actual.
Oh, no. This is calculated, actually. Take a class to
Such a good review. Okay.
Wow, this is nice.
Easy actually works. No, I'm sure yesterday they were only 4 of us, not necessarily. And and then after
My grandfather was born in Turkey, but the language speaks from his parents on Spanish. He can speak Latin, ancient Spanish. They can speak in Spanish.
tomorrow at 9:30.
Yeah, I thought it was a mixture of Hebrew and Spanish.
Yeah, but no, it's not like here. It's not like here. It's just Spanish.
I thought that was, yeah, pretty sure.
You miss your tuna bag though?
My
Practice are pretty good.
No people.
I used to count those Dunkin' Donuts.
Oh my god, it's like you have all the right. Yeah, I was gonna say you have all the right to be. I was keep scared. I was like, I know the teachers. Whatever. I don't know. I didn't like. She just really has to do like delicious and weird work.
Have you ever been to a restaurant where it's
Man, just go from there.
well, I don't remember the kids remember there were 2 separate seating.
No, they do, but they do it with the
I wanted like a breakfast. Irish breakfast. It wasn't like a restaurant breakfast. It was like a tuna bag of like. I don't think it was a place that a woman would want to go The ramen are getting expensive.
No, I don't think so.
So we have a few goals for today. First of all, we need to cover the brainstem, the cranial nerves, and the vestibular system. Our second goal is to have at least 3 breaks of 15 minutes. And the last goal is to be done with all of it by 1 o'clock, right? But in the middle, we can divide the time however we want. So we try to make all 3 goals. Can someone please shut the door if we have 5 and get. So maybe we'll have the next break around 11:15, like 45 or 50 minutes from now. So just to go back to where we were, so we described the brainstem from the ventral aspect, and now we're looking from the back of the head on the dorsal aspect of the brain, and we described areas of the telencephalon, the diencephalon, and now we'll start to describe the midbrain of the brainstem. And the back, the posterior, the dorsal side, all on the same of the midbrain, is this lamina or plata quadragemina, or the tectum, the roof of the midbrain. 4 colliculi, 2 superior colliculi, and 2 inferior. The superior colliculus gets visual information and is connected to the lateral geniculate body of the thalamus through the superior vacuum. The inferior colliculus is an auditory nucleus, and the auditory information goes through the inferior vacuum to the medial geniculate body. Now, about this visual and auditory systems. So, the superior colliculus is part of the visual system, but it is not obligatory for the sense of vision. So the superior colliculus is involved in reflexes of light, but a damage to the superior colliculus would not cause blindness. So when we'll talk about the optic nerve, I will briefly describe the optic pathway, but you can have almost a complete sense of vision without the superior colliculus. On the other hand, there's this phenomenon that's called cortical blindness. Did you ever heard about it? So cortical blindness is in this class or in different occasions? Not in this. Anyway, so cortical blindness, the conscious aspect of vision is damaged because of damage to the primary or other cortical regions. But the information that gets to the superior colliculus is still intact. And people with cortical blindness can't declare about visual information. The way they exhibit, the way they sense the world is that they are blind. But if you put an obstacle in front of them, they might do this thing and pass through it. And theoretically, if you throw a tennis ball at them, they might duck or use the hand to move it because they have a bit of aspects of sight. They have reflexes. It sounds very weird, but during my work at the Sheba Medical Center, I happened to meet someone with cortical blindness, and it's very weird. So they have like a bit of sense. You ask them questions about visual, and they declare that I don't see anything. And then you ask, so just guess, is there someone in front of you or not? Then they guess yes. Then you move aside and now not, and they make it like 100% of the times. So they say I don't know, but they do have a sense of vision through this different circuits of vision. Yeah.
Do we know how this works? They can't.
Yeah, because there is information. So let's put aside questions about quizzes and tests. So now we're talking about, it's like the Descartes conversation, okay? But just I think that this small shifts from the main anatomy helps to remember the anatomy. So we'll take 5 minutes for that. So information from the eye goes through the optic nerve and the optic tract and goes to the lateral geniculate body. Most of the information from the lateral geniculate body goes to the back of the head, to the region. Do you know where the primary visual cortex is located? On the occipital lobe, right on the calcarine sulcus. In the margins and in the depth of the calcarine sulcus, the information goes, you don't need to write it down. It's not about, you're more than welcome to write it down.
Catching up fine.
It's not about the brain. Anyway, so the information is going to the calcarine sulcus through the optic radiation. This is the name of this graph, from the lateral geniculate body. But this is 90% of the information. But 10% of the information goes from the lateral geniculate body through the superior vacuum. We can't see it because it is behind the MGB. So 10% of the information goes in here. So let's say you have a damage to the optic radiation, to the tract that connects the MGB to the occipital lobe, or you have a damage to the occipital lobe. The consciousness of vision is damaged, and the information that goes in here doesn't work. But you still have this 10% of visual information. So the brainstem is involved, is evolutionary speaking, is very primitive. It is involved in primal aspects of sensation. So you do have reflexes of vision. You do have basic information about vision. You don't have the conscious part. You don't have the interpretation of it, but the information gets to the brainstem. So very simple circuits are intact. Obviously, if the damage is to the eye or to the optic nerve, no information is going through. But if the damage is in the cortex, this circuit is still intact. So this is why.
Where does it go? The 10%? It goes from the lateral to where?
The lateral from the lateral genital body to the superior colliculus, and then through the midbrain, through the brainstem, there are reflexes. Another part of it is that there are reflexes that if you know the reflex of the pupil. If you take a light through the pupil
Contracts.
Yeah, exactly. But the other pupil does the same. So these reflexes are not don't need consciousness. They don't need a cerebral cortex. So these are phenomena that still works even if there's cortical damage. Okay, so this is just yeah.
By 90%, 10%, do you mean like the fibers of the neurons? What is, how do you get any?
So this is very complicated to do these measurements. It's more of an estimation than measurements, but you can count how many of the neurons in the lateral genital body are connected. But to be honest, I can't believe that someone sat down and counted and says 90,000, 14, and 5. You know, it's not an exact number. This is an estimation, but most of the fibers, at least 90%, in human that our visual system is very conscious. It has something to do with the way we perceive the environment. 90% goes to the cortex. So let's go back for writing now, and let's go back to the brainstem. So we mentioned so this is the tectum, and we mentioned the fourth cranial nerve when we talked about the ventral aspect. We can see the third one, we can see it. So remember, this was, let's go back. This was the third. We can see it from the dorsal aspect. And actually, all of these cranial nerves are visible only from the ventral aspect, except one, the fourth cranial nerve, the trochlear. The fourth cranial nerve leaves the brainstem from the dorsal aspect. This is the only one that does that. And this is why we can see it in here. So this is the trochlear nerve, and when we look at the ventral aspect, we see it coming from behind the crus cerebri. This is what we can see here, the crus cerebri or the cerebral peduncle. This is where we can see this. So this is the other side of the trochlear, and now we can see the site where it leaves the midbrain, just beneath the inferior colliculus. So this this image, this is the same brainstem, just shifted a bit to the side. So I can't say it's a complete dorsal or ventral aspect, and it's not the lateral aspect as well. It's just shifted in like 20 degrees to the side. And again, we can see the fourth colliculi. Remember what this is? Pineal body or pineal gland, exactly. This is the MGB body connected. Oh, just to complete the idea. So, as opposed to the superior colliculus, the inferior colliculus is obligatory for hearing. So all of the auditory information goes through here. So damage to the inferior colliculus will cause deafness. So as opposed to the superior colliculus that is involved in vision, but only for reflexes and primal aspects of vision, the inferior colliculus is obligatory for hearing. So the inferior colliculus, this is the inferior brachium, is very thick as opposed to the superior, but also short because the medial geniculate body is very close. And this is the superior brachium. It is more thin, but also more long because it needs to get to a lateral nucleus, to the LGB. This is the trochlear. This is the cerebral peduncle we met before. What is this? Any idea? So this is already the pons. This is the middle cerebellar peduncle. This is the fifth cranial nerve. And in here it would be the basilar part of pons, what we saw earlier in here. So it would be much easier in the lab where you can just shift it from side to side by yourself and not many slides. And anyway, so this is the basilar part of pons. Just to cover this, so we talk about the trochlear, and now we'll start covering the pons. So we talked about the midbrain, both in ventral and dorsal aspects, and now in the dorsal aspect, let's talk about the pons. So the basilar part is on the ventral side, and we don't see much of it. This is the trigeminal nerve, and this is the middle cerebellar peduncle, and it is cut because in order to remove the cerebellum, you need to cut his legs, his peduncles. So this is the middle cerebellar peduncle. And in the dorsal aspect, the completely dorsal aspect of the pons, we actually see several structures, and we refer to these structures as well as other structures as the floor of the fourth ventricle. So again, in the human brain, when we look at this, the brainstem, this is the fourth ventricle. The fourth ventricle is between the brainstem and the cerebellum. And when we look at the brainstem, we refer to this region as the floor of the ventricle, although in the human brain it would make more sense to call it an anterior wall, right? But again, if we think about tetrapods, about rodents, even about a monkey, this is the fourth ventricle, this part between the cerebellum and the brainstem. So the brainstem serves as a floor, and the cerebellum serves as a roof, or above the roof, even above the roof of the fourth ventricle. And the same terminology is used for humans, although the angle between the brainstem and the cerebrum is different. So we'll call it a floor, although it's not on the inferior aspect of the brainstem. So the floor of the fourth ventricle, you can see that it has the shape of a rhomboid, of two triangles joined together to make a rhomboid, and this is why the floor of the fourth ventricle is also called the rhomboid fossa. So the rhomboid fossa is built from a pontine triangle. This part of the rhomboid fossa is a part of the pons. This is the part of the pons we see in the dorsal aspect, and a medullary triangle. So this is the part of the pons that the part of the medulla oblongata that we see in the dorsal aspect. Okay, so the floor of the fourth ventricle, the shape of a rhomboid. The top triangle of this rhomboid is the part of the pons, and the lower triangle is a part of the medulla. So let us describe the pontine triangle first. So you can see a sulcus in the middle, like we saw in between the two pyramids in the medulla and the ventral aspect. You can see a very clear border, and this sulcus is called the median sulcus. It is exactly on the midline, so it's not surprising. It's not a surprising name. And we also see a sulcus in here that calls sulcus limitans. Okay, so median sulcus and sulcus limitans. Did you met this term when we talked about embryology? Sulcus limitans. Yeah, so I just give a short reminder. So this is the developing neural tube. During development, it's always during all lectures of this class. It's very important to remember that the entire central nervous system is a continuous tube. It has different regions. It has the cerebral, the cerebrum, it has the cerebellum, it has the spinal cord, but all of it is a continuous tube. So during development, this is the neural tube, and the bottom this is the ventral aspect of the neural tube, and this is the dorsal aspect. So the orientation in here is like in the embryo is like a tetrapod. So the ventrum is in the inferior aspect, and the dorsum is in the superior aspect. So this region is going to be, this in the spinal cord, is going to be part of the motor system, and this is part of the sensory system. It's not that important for now. But the border between the dorsal part, the part we call an alar plate, and the ventral part, the basal plate, is this sulcus, and we call it sulcus limitans. So in the embryo, the sulcus limitans separates ventral aspect and dorsal aspect, alar plate and basal plate. But inside the medulla, as opposed to things that happens more superior or in the spinal cord more inferior, happens a unique thing. So the neural tube opens a bit, and you can see this phenomena. In the way the fourth ventricle is being created, the tube doing something like this, and this sulcus limitans that at the beginning separated ventral area to a dorsal area, now separates a medial area to a lateral area. Is that clear? So if we have a neural tube like this, specifically in the fourth ventricle, it does something like this in order to create a ventricle. And then the sulcus limitans that was in here, now in here. Okay? Any questions about it? So, any questions? So this is why we can find the sulcus limitans. We can't find it in any other region of the brain. We have dorsal regions and ventral regions, and the brain develops. But we can still see this sulcus limitans specifically in the floor of the fourth ventricle. And now, instead of separating a dorsal region and the ventral region, it's separated a medial to a lateral region. Okay, so this is the median sulcus, and this is the sulcus limitans, and it was just a small, short explanation about how it relates to the sulcus limitans in the developing neural tube.
Just, I forget, which one was dorsal and ventral, basal, and alar plate?
So let's have a look again. So basal is ventral. Okay, think of a crocodile. Everything is much easier and more simple in the nervous system if you think of a crocodile. You can think of any other animal, but for some reason most textbooks love crocodile. So the base, the basal part, is where the abdomen is towards the stomach. So basal plate is the ventral, and the back is superior, so alar. So the word alar means the side of the wings. This is come from birds, actually. Yeah. So the wings are from the back, and the base is where the belly is. So basal is the ventral, and alar is the dorsal. Between the median sulcus and sulcus limitans, you can see this elongated bump that's called medial eminence. This is the medial eminence. This thing that you can see in here. And at the bottom end of the median eminence, you can see this area, this colliculi, again, like this bump that calls the facial colliculi. Okay, this is the facial colliculus of the right side and the facial colliculus of the left side. Okay? More lateral to the facial colliculi, these regions, we'll call them in general vestibular area. There are several nucleus that are connected to the vestibular system in these lateral regions of the rhomboid fossa. Actually, the vestibular area is both in the pontine triangular and in the medullary triangle. We haven't started talking about the medullary triangle yet, but all of it is a vestibular area. Okay, so median sulcus, medial eminence, sulcus limitans, and this is vestibular area. You can see this region in here. There's a region that has a bit of a blue color, which is an unusual color to find in anatomy in most regions. So in the lab, I can't promise that you will see a blue region. Not all brains, it's not detectable in all brains. One of my instructors in the course I give in the neuroscience school sometimes take his pen and just die and blow. No, but sometimes you can see a blue region. So this region called lucus ceruleus. So just in Latin, celum means heaven. This is the word for the color blue comes from it. I know it's CO and not CE, but you pronounce it not column, but celum. You know, like the word. So it's complicated in Latin, but CA and CE and CO are sometimes mixed with each other. It's like the word, right? Theoretically, you shouldn't pronounce it Caesar like they do in Latin, but you would say Caesar, right? CA. So it's the same thing with CO. So sometimes you will see it with an E, but it's called lucus ceruleus, the blue location, okay? And this part is in here. So this is the nucleus. The reason why this area is looking blue is because there are neurons there that produce the neurotransmitter norepinephrine or noradrenaline. It's the same thing. So during the production of you don't need, it's not, you told me that you have an exam, pharmacology exam. I don't want to frighten you, you don't need to know all of this stuff, right? But during the production of dopamine and norepinephrine, a byproduct of it is neuromelanin, and it gives us color. So the first thing you see, the first place you see it in the brain is in the substantia nigra. In the substantia nigra, there are neurons that produce dopamine, and this is what makes it nigra, a black color, right, in the substantia nigra. So a similar process in the locus ceruleus, in the production of norepinephrine, causes this pigment. Gives us the bluish color in here. So just to summarize the pontine triangle, sulcus, median sulcus, sulcus limitans, medial eminence with the facial colliculi at the end. This is the vestibular area, and this bluish region is the blue location, or in Latin, locus ceruleus. Any questions about the pontine triangle? Excellent. So let's describe the medullary, the inferior triangle. So first of all, you can see these stripes. These stripes are the border between the upper triangle to the lower triangle. They are called stria medullaris. Stria medullaris, not to be confused with the stria medullaris with an I of the thalamus. Have you met the stria medullaris already? So if you remember, in the middle of the thalamus, there's this stripe that's called stria medullaris. Stria medullaris of the thalamus, or stria medullaris thalami. So this is the stria medullaris, or medullary stria. Okay, so this is the stria of the medulla. So the stria medullaris is this bundle of axons, these stripes that gives us the border between the upper triangle and the lower triangle. In addition, you can see these two small triangles in here, the hypoglossal and vagal triangle. The hypoglossal, sometimes it looks like one of them is more is superior and the other is more inferior, and sometimes they look like a bit more lateral and medial. You'll see it in the lab. And the hypoglossal and vagal triangle, so we'll elaborate about it later. The hypoglossal nerve is the 9th cranial nerve, and the vagus nerve is the 10th cranial nerve. And the nuclei of these nerves are within the hypoglossal and vagal triangle. Okay, so these are these two triangles. Another area that you can see here is the obex. The obex is the location where the fourth ventricle is closed. And you can see these margins of the fourth ventricle. And starting from the obex, the medulla is closed again. So the midbrain is closed. The lower part of the medulla is closed. And only in the pons and upper part of the medulla, we have this part of the fourth ventricle where the brainstem is open. It's not completely open. It's not. There are covers about it. We'll talk about it when we'll talk about the ventricular system. But the place where the medulla is being closed is this point here, the obex. And very similar, very close to the obex, just this location, just these margins, is an area called the area postrema. This is a very interesting location in the medulla oblongata.
Hypoglossal, what cranial nerve?
Hypoglossal is the 9th, and the vagus is the 10th. Sorry.
Should it be 12?
Sorry. The glossopharyngeal is a mix between the glossopharyngeal and the hypoglossal. The hypoglossal is the 12th. The hypoglossal is the 12th, sorry. So thank you for the correction. So the hypoglossal nerve is the 12th cranial nerve. We'll cover all of them a bit later today. There's a lot of we'll talk about it later. There are many nerves that are involved with the glossa, with the tongue. The 9th cranial nerve is the glossopharyngeal. Sorry. Thank you for the correction. So, the area postrema in here. So, did you talk about the blood-brain barrier already? A little. So, there's the organization of blood vessels in the brain is a bit different than the rest of the body. So, the brain has you can call it like a protection mechanism. The epithelial cells, the cells that build the blood vessels in the brain have tight junctions between them. And molecules, it's very difficult for molecules to go from the brain, from the blood to the brain. Only small molecules small molecules can go out from the blood and enter the brain. And this is called the blood-brain barrier. This is a way to protect the brain. And the blood-brain barrier is in several regions, specific regions in the brain, is less strict. So in this location, in the area postrema, it's easier to a molecule to go from the blood to the brain. And this location, this is the vomiting center of the brainstem. And the thing about this region is that the vomiting center needs to know what happens in the blood. And if you ate something toxic and you have it in your blood now, it's a good thing that the brainstem will know about it and then will cause the reflex of vomiting to get whatever is still in the stomach to get it out. So this is the area postrema, and this is the reason why the blood-brain barrier is less strict in this location. Yeah.
Histologically, is there just less tight junctions in the
Yeah,
area system?
exactly. The blood vessels themselves are built a bit different.
Which areas do they, wait, what's the difference in the OPEX and the area for?
So the OBEX is this specific point.
Okay.
Okay, to make it more clear, there is one OBEX and area postrema in both ends. So this in here, this is area postrema and this is area postrema, and the OBEX is exactly here.
So yeah, that's exactly
Yeah.
what it is.
Did you point out where the hypoglossal tracheal trigons are?
This is the this is the hypoglossal trigon, and this is the vagal trigon. But sometimes you see in some of the drawings, it looks like in here. Is there a bone beneath it?
Take some time. Mhm.
Okay, so this is the hypoglossal trigon, and this is the vagal trigon, but sometimes it looks like one of them is superior and one of them is inferior. See, it looks like this in this drawing, but actually it's sometimes more of something like this. You'll see it in the lab. And then this is the hypoglossal more medial, and this is the vagal more lateral. But the hypoglossal is a bit more superior, and the vagal is a bit more inferior. But in this drawing, it looks a bit different. So it's not look exactly the same in all brains. So any other questions about these OBEX or the area postrema? Okay, so let's move along. So this is just to show what I mentioned before. So this is the hypoglossal trigon. This is another way of showing it. This is the hypoglossal trigon. And this is the vagal trigon. So it's a bit different way of picturing it. Again, this is the stria medullaris, the medullary stria, and all of other structures which we saw earlier. And this is how it actually looks like. Okay, so it's the trigons are sometimes not that detectable in the actual brain as it is in the drawing. So now, we described the midbrain, the pons, and the part of the medulla that inside the rhomboid fossa, the medullary trigon of the rhomboid fossa. But beneath the fourth ventricle, we have another part of the medulla that is closed. So not all the medulla is open. And now we're going to describe this part of the medulla. So close to the midline, again, now this is the dorsal aspect, not to be confused with the ventral aspect. In the ventral aspect, we saw the pyramid, we saw the olive, and the inferior cerebellar peduncle. In the dorsal aspect, we can also see these elongated structures. So this structure in here, we have one in each side of the midbrain, is called the gracile tubercle, or in Greek or Latin, tuberculus gracilis. It's the same gracile tubercle. This one's in here, and more lateral to it, we have the cuneate tubercle. So this is the gracile tubercle and cuneate tubercle. And these are part of the sensory pathways. So this is the tubercle, and continuous to them are the fasciculus gracilis and fasciculus cuneatus of the spinal cord. Okay, so this is going to be the spinal cord, and this is going to be fasciculus gracilis and fasciculus cuneatus, and this is the tubercle. The fasciculus gracilis and the gracile tubercle has axons, as tracts of sensory information that comes from the lower limb. Okay, so sensation from the legs will go through this fasciculus gracilis and goes to the nucleus gracilis inside the gracile tubercle. And sensory information from the upper limb will go through the fasciculus cuneatus to the cuneate tubercle and the cuneate nucleus inside of it. Okay? An easy way to remember it is that the legs are more medial and the hands are more lateral, right? So the fasciculus are the same. The more medial fasciculus are is information from the leg, and in here goes sensory information from the upper limb. Okay? Yeah. So it's a semantical difference. So in the picture, this region is the tubercle. This is a part of the medulla. And starting from here, it's already the spinal cord, and then you have the fasciculus. Okay? So did you know what the meaning of the word fasciculus?
Like,
yeah, it's like a fascicle, you know, what the name, right? So it's so this is a gathering of a lot of tracts all bunched together. Yeah.
Can you just please show me again where the fasciculus gracilis is and also the natus?
So let me just show all of these, okay? So this is the fasciculus gracilis of one side, and this is the fasciculus gracilis of the other side. This is the fasciculus cuneatus, and this again another fasciculus cuneatus. And at the end of the fasciculus, and the fasciculus goes throughout the spinal cord. Did you talk about it when we talked about the spinal cord? Oh, you haven't spoken about the spinal cord yet. Okay, so
we have a lecture.
So this is a bit of a spoiler. So let's say in the spinal cord, if we do a cross section of the spinal cord, it looks something like this.
that much. We did that. Yeah, that's lead. We did that.
Little butterfly.
Okay, so this is the spinal cord. This is a cross section of the spinal cord. So in the middle,
Can you use a different marker?
yeah. Any specific color you put on? Let's try the black. Yeah, that's an insert. So just not to make it out of context. This is a cross section of the spinal cord. This is the central canal. The central canal is the cavity. It's like the ventricle. It is continuous to the ventricular system. This is the cavity of the spinal cord. This thing started the coloring with the brown marker, but it's not that good. This is the gray matter. And the white matter is on the outside. Okay, gray matter in here, white matter in here. And this is a cross section, but when we look on the entire spinal cord, all of these bundles of white matter looks like cables. Okay? Does anyone know how to say cable in Latin or in Italian?
Cable. It would be cable technically.
There's a joke in Hebrew that you can get by in Italy if you just say ino at the end of every word. And it's like never Cabellino. Yeah, Cabellino. No, it's not cable. So again, some of that is not going to be in the text. So I'm not going to be in the test. So most of you have been to Florence. We managed to realize that already. And someone went to Naples as well while traveling in Italy. So there's a very big volcano in Naples called, Mount Vesuvius, right? So like 150 years ago, a bit less, I think in the late 19th century, they did, so I'm going to give the answer. So they built this, how do you call this train that goes on cable?
Metro cable car.
Okay, so they built a cable car. And then there's a very famous Napoleon song that celebrates this cable car that goes, you know the song? I don't have it.
Is that
I have an auditory version of it in here. Never mind. I'm not going to sing opera, but those funiculi, funicula, you know this song? Yeah? So anyway, no, it's important to give it the proper...
Wait, that was 150 years ago?
Less than 100, I think it was like 100.
You said Napoleonic? Napoleon died in 1820. Yeah, I don't think it's Napoleonic. Are you gonna play it?
Yeah, why not? Like short break.
I'm pretty sure you just say cable in Italian. Oh, Andre Bocelli?
Yeah.
Yeah.
When he was alive back then.
If Josh Fine was here, he'd have a blast.
Josh Fine sang this song.
Yeah?
Yeah, I forgot what one in orientation.
Right?
Yeah,
There were so many.
No, I think it's the first time he ever sang. That's what he sang.
There's no this is the part way. Okay, so let's go back. So you know what funiculum is? So the cable car is also called a funicular plane. So funiculus, all of this break was to say that funiculus means cables in Latin. Okay, but this is a good way to remember.
Thank you.
So this is in the spinal cord. This is the dorsal funiculus, and this is the lateral. You don't have to write these things down, but you do need to know the lyrics of this. It's not that funiculi, funicula. This is the dorsal funiculus. This is the lateral funiculus, and this is the anterior funiculus. And each funiculus is built from fasciculus. Okay. So you have these two fasciculus. This is the fasciculus gracilis, and this is the fasciculus cuneatus. It's called fasciculus cuneatus because in this slice it looks like a cone, like a triangle. So this is the fasciculus gracilis, and this is the fasciculus cuneatus. These are sensory tracts from the lower limb, and these are sensory tracts from the upper limb. So fasciculus gracilis, fasciculus cuneatus, and together this is the dorsal funiculus. Okay? So now we're going, let's say this is a patient lying on his belly. So let's go anterior, okay? And we'll get in here to the brainstem. So this is fasciculus gracilis, and this is fasciculus cuneatus. And the end of the fasciculus gracilis is in this tubercle, or you can call it tuberculus gracilis or gracile tubercle. And the end of the cuneate, the fasciculus cuneatus, is in the cuneate tubercle. And inside of each tubercle, there are nuclei. Nucleus gracilis, nucleus cuneatus. Okay? Is that more clear now? Any questions about any of it? Okay, so these structures in here are still parts of the medulla oblongata, and there's an arbitrary border between the brainstem and the spinal cord. The border is the location of foramen magnum in the skull. You're familiar with this term. So foramen magnum is somewhere in here, and beneath foramen magnum, we say it's not the closed part of the medulla anymore, but it's the spinal cord. But as you already know, and I mentioned before, the central nervous system is a continuous tube. So this border is artificial. Okay? So when you'll have a talk about the spinal cord, remember this fasciculus gracilis and fasciculus cuneatus, and remember that this is continuous with the brainstem. Okay, any questions? So we said we'll have a break on 11:15, right? Okay, so it's 11 and 14 minutes, so let's break now. Okay, so we'll go back 2 minutes and 11:30.
We're going to start a new lecture? Are we going to start a new lecture, or it's going to be a continuation? It's all continuous, okay.
I'm like trying to figure it out because I told my family about it, but I don't really want to go all on into the so yeah, I'm going on everything. I've given up. I decided I want to get free. I want to have friends. Yesterday, I fell asleep on the back floor. And I really didn't know where I just sat there by myself, like, this person was sitting, going like, it was completely like, I wouldn't be concerned about me, but I was just sitting there and I was just the window was open, I was like, thank you, I gotta eat it. Tell me all about it.
Adam,
how did you miss that piece of information?
Watch. Have you go?
Or just this one? They're old. They're like 30s. They're like 60-year-old thing? They're like older. I never noticed that, but it was just like no. Okay.
Anyway, so on Saturday there's a big uproar.
Right.
I'm pretty sure it was Tommy, and like now that you verify that that's a real teacher, I'm more sure, but I haven't yet been convinced, unless you know my teacher taught white students. I haven't yet been to a class where she would have. And you said you taught Sunday, Monday?
No, she teaches Sunday, Monday. I'm not sure what other classes she teaches. Actually, you know what? I have it in my phone.
So like, the guy was great.
Okay.
He was like polished.
So he was supposed to take over for, he took over for Connie's
He's like
class,
the
because she
head.
was supposed to teach.
He's like the head of like the workout classes. Anyways. And then next was this girl who has been in the States for 13 years. So I was like, oh, she's gonna be great. She like wasn't. And she's like, she didn't have her music flow right, and like kept like really silence. And then people were like, there were these two people who spoke to me English. She was doing it all over, like, and then these people said, like, we don't understand this.
No, I just make
And then like she like said that we're gonna do this.
big sales challenge.
Like tell us what we're doing.
No, it's not a
Oh,
it has to be part of also.
Because Connie would just be like, you're going to do this, this is like, like what you're doing for the next 20 minutes.
And he also did that. She like outlined like this is how we're gonna do it. And she was good at that. People didn't like her.
I don't know, I happen to not mind that though.
I don't
As long as they tell you this on the spot, you can't do this.
Yeah.
I don't mind.
You have to ask.
Still watch like things like left, and like jump.
Yeah. Jumps are really
So she like had good techniques. She wasn't taught. I think she's also really nervous because her first time teaching.
Does she have good form? Because that's what bothers me a lot. Is when instructors don't have good forms, they correct you if your form's off.
I think that her bike was actually no resistance because she was like bumping and jumping.
Oh, so it's new base low resistance. But
like,
the bridge empties off into that.
but like, I thought it was still a good workout.
do you feel like you've got a couple of
I thought the guy on Saturday was fast. So I thought Ronnie was like good.
The restaurant,
She was the best. She would have been great. She had
like she was more
music and like and people had to just one guy was like really fit. It's an exact science. Like you're not telling us what to do. She's like, I know people
Awesome. I think I'm going to be back. What's it called? I'm going to go back to see it on Sunday. I haven't been there before. So I was saying this week. That's why I didn't go the week, and then last night was like exhausted. I was doing it again because like FaceTiming that one.
Is it there?
So yeah. I'm gonna hopefully be back on Sunday.
Joey also. He had a deal with
So it's complicated. Basically, yeah, someone I know.
He was okay.
Okay, so my cousins, right? Their grandparents on the other side. But like our whole family are all Christian. So like my cousins in Jerusalem are really my cousins. Like I consider them cousins also. So their mother is Shiva, because her brother died. And so her brother lives in Israel, and so my cousins are actually because he's sick. But now I'm the only one like in my family who's in Israel, so I kind of have to go to my mother. So I'm like, whatever. I like talking to them. So that's like it's not like no, so like I'm like when I hear like all these conversations and everything like that, I know some person who died. But I know I think if my grandparents died, so what time I get back? I'm gonna be this time as yeah, I'm gonna go to that, and then which means I'll get to I'll probably end up if one of my other friends like I'll be say hi, and if not, I'll come back and just get to them. After a while, I know if I leave Academy, I can technically get to like I say Academy bus station to and I could technically get there about 4:30 because they come back.
And if we don't have it, they make it. I mean, we have like very universal.
You'll see.
But like realistically, it's not gonna happen. I'm gonna end up talking to everybody, and then my cousin's gonna be like, "Oh, actually, I decided I'm not going to class, so let's go hang out." Whatever. It's like I'm not sure if it's but if not,
I imagine like people will still do it,
But then
but
it,
they might have to wait.
yeah. It's
I was surprised originally how late they agreed to have it.
not just because babies in the soup so
And also, Josh has something that he was supposed to do on Monday, but then he came back.
With the 5 a.m., I thought that was real, and then I thought that was really cute because like babies are up all night long. So like I was like, oh, that's really appropriate.
No, it was just my stepmother said it for me the day because it's party at 5 a.m. I don't know.
So you said it, and I was like, oh, that's really cute. That makes sense.
But babies
I'm really curious to see what's gonna happen. I'm really excited about that.
yeah, really, I would feel like I almost didn't go last night because I was so tired. My brain was just fried. And I was like, no, and then so I was like, I'll just make dinner, and then I like made dinner. I should go. So I like made dinner, and then I came back and made dinner, and I was like, okay, this is good.
So I think those other good things I've been missing really this concept. Like now I've got sleep. Yeah. And so like I've been like here but sick, it's not doing like everything, whatever. Like whatever. So like or just like sober not I don't know.
You're just, yeah, you're just like gathered a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think always the first week of the block, I'm like, it's really hard for me to get back in. With this block, it's like, the first week of the block is like the whole block. Like all this information. So I'm like, oh my god, this week is gonna suck. But sometimes I just need it. Yesterday I napped and I napped.
Okay, let's hear anyone playing basketball, not accepting Cleveland basketball.
Like, every time I was like 5 and I was like, wait a second, is it 5:30 in the morning? Is it 5:30? It's not really good. And you're like, where? It was bad. I was like so scared. I think I'm really lucky to have for really.
How big was more into that? Interesting. So what's going to be on quiz too?
I have no idea. Like everything else is like lab. Sometimes you have like 2 types a day, but like there's I like them. Like so like it's a lot of information, but it's a lot of like social relationships, and because it's so concentrated, it's like okay, spend a lot of time. This goes from here to here to there. Like that's the whole structure. It's totally masterable as long as you put the time, but it's not like. I got it and it was pinks aren't the thing, but it's like mauve and color.
It's like very like.
It's like how they send it.
That's what happens when I go to this party. I walk in, there's the S thing, and I'm like, this one, that one. Dangerous. So yes, I think
Hours and hours and hours. You got it. Yeah.
Mine's mainly medical students, I guess. Unless you know someone.
There's like, oh, number of weeks in a row, like I was here, I was like, I was like 2 weeks ago, I was like, pretty now, whatever. And then my cousin
Yo, it's so cold in here. It's so hot outside. It's like. Perfect.
And again, about half of it was like,
Oh yeah, but like, so are you? Yeah.
Okay, so this example wants to stay on the schedule, so let's continue. So just the last thing I want to say about the dorsal aspect of the brainstem is that, so few people asked me about it during the break. So we mentioned the floor of the fourth ventricle, but obviously the ventricle should have also a roof. So it's not like the nervous system is completely open, widely open. So you can see in this drawing. So this is the middle cerebellar peduncle coming from the pons. But in here you can also see the superior cerebellar peduncle on his way to the midline. This is the superior cerebellar peduncle. And between the two superior cerebellar peduncle, there's a velum, like a curtain. This is the superior medullary velum. And the superior medullary velum, hello? So we're trying to be on schedule, finish the time. So let me just go back. I'll start from the beginning for the people that just entered. I know the line in the cafeteria can be frustrating here. So I just said that the fourth ventricle, we talked about the floor, but it also has a roof. So it's not completely open. We can't see the roof, most of the roof in here, because the cerebellum was removed in order for us to examine the floor, but there is a roof. So this is the middle cerebellar peduncle. We saw it from the other side going to the pons. And this is the superior cerebellar peduncle on his way from the cerebellum to the midbrain. This is the superior cerebellar peduncle. And between the two superior cerebellar peduncles, there's like a curtain, a superior medullary velum. This is the superior medullary velum. And if the cerebellum was intact, you will see that the velum is covering the entire pontine triangle, all of it. And the superior medullary velum serves as the roof of the fourth ventricle in the pontine triangle. And in the medullary triangle, there's an inferior medullary velum. Did you learn about it? When you learn about the cerebellum, you mentioned the flocculus, the flocculonodular lobe. Remember something like that? So if you remember in the cerebellum, need another board. Never mind about it. So in the cerebellum, I don't have a slide for the cerebellum with me. There's the nodule, the end of the vermis. There's this flocculus of one side, and the flocculus on the other side. And the nodule is connected to the flocculus by an inferior medullary valve, if you remember the term. So we can't see it in here, but the inferior medullary valve is part of the roof of the fourth ventricle in the medullary triangle. Okay? In addition, we'll talk about it later when we talk about the ventricular system. So the next thing, the last thing, well, it's not the last, but the next thing I want us to do is to look at the brainstem in the mid-sagittal section. So now we're not looking from the ventrum, and not from the dorsum, not from the ventral part or the dorsal part, but we're looking at the mid-sagittal section. So this is the thalamus, right? This is the thalamus, hypothalamus, corpus callosum, etc. And this is the brainstem. So first, the midbrain. So this is the tectum of the midbrain. So when we looked at the tectum from behind, we saw this lamina quadrigemina. In here, the midbrain is cut in half, so we can see one superior colliculus and one inferior colliculus. The other two are on the other side, okay? So this is the superior colliculus and inferior colliculus. This is the same tectum. Now you can see why it is called a roof. Okay, and this is, did you learn about the cerebral aqueduct? So we'll mention it again later on, but this is the cerebral aqueduct. And the cerebral aqueduct separates the roof of the midbrain, the tectum of the midbrain, and this part of the midbrain, which is called the tegmentum. Okay, so this is the tegmentum of the midbrain, this is the tectum, and between them the cerebral aqueduct. By the way, this is the pineal gland again, or pineal body, we saw it earlier today. Now the pons. So the tegmentum of midbrain is continuous with this part of the pons, which is the tegmentum of the pons, this part. And the most anterior part of the pons, ventral to the tegmentum of the pons, is this huge thing, which we already met from the ventral aspect, which is the basilar part of pons. So in the midbrain, the tegmentum is the most ventral area, the most ventral structure, because it has a tectum more dorsal. And in the pons, the tegmentum is dorsal, and there's a more ventral structure called basilar part of pons. So not to be confused, the tegmentum is continuous, but in the midbrain, there's another structure behind the tegmentum, and in the pons, there's another structure in front of the tegmentum. Okay? Is it clear? Excellent. In addition, we can see the superior medullary valve. This is the superior medullary valve. Earlier, we only saw this edge of the superior medullary valve, but in here we can see the entire valve. This is the superior medullary valve, closing the fourth ventricle for us, making the roof of the ventricle. Okay? And this is the inferior medullary valve. So if you remember your lesson about the cerebellum, this is the nodule. So the vermis have a very unique way. This is the nodule. So the flocculonodular lobe is made by the nodule, and the inferior medullary valve that leaves the nodule and goes out toward the flocculus. Anyway, so the superior medullary valve and the inferior medullary valve close the ventricle for us, and the cerebellum is just behind them. Or if it was an alligator, the cerebellum was above them, right? This is the fourth ventricle. You can see here the coral plexus of the ventricle. We'll talk about it later on. And about that, I'll mention the aperture when we talk about the ventricular system. In addition, you can see the pyramidal diffusation here. It's not that important. The last thing I want to show you is cross sections of the brainstem. So again, this is the midbrain. This is a cross section through the midbrain. And when we look at the cross section of the midbrain, we can see that this region we call cerebral peduncle is comprised of several things. So this is the white matter, the crus cerebri. This is what we saw, like two legs from the outside. But the entire peduncle has other things in it as well. So there's this region. This is the substantia nigra. For some reason, in this drawing, they didn't color it in black, but this is the substantia nigra. And another thing we can see in the midbrain, is these two nuclei that has a lot of iron and blood supply to it, so they have a red, some kind of a red color, or red color. This is called the red nucleus. These two. Another thing you can see the cerebral aqueduct, this thing that looks like a hole, okay? If I cut it in here, it looks just as a circle, and there's gray matter surrounding the aqueduct called peri-aqueductal gray. The gray matter around the aqueduct. Okay, this is another drawing of it. So this is crus cerebri. This is the substantia nigra. This is the red nucleus. And this is the peri-aqueductal gray. For me, it always looks like a cartoon of Mickey Mouse, just upside down. This is the eyes, this is the mouth, and these are the ears, okay? But whatever helps you remember. So this is crus cerebri and the substantia nigra, red nucleus, peri-aqueductal gray, and the aqueduct. These are, by the way, the inferior, it can be either the inferior or superior colliculi. Okay, see these bumps of the tectum. When we look at the pons, you can see that the basilar part of pons is built out of fibers. These are fibers that connect the pons to the cerebellum. These are pontocerebellar fibers. They will go through the middle cerebellar peduncles to the cerebellum. There are several nuclei inside of it. But what the important thing I want you to see, you remember the facial colliculus? We saw at the floor of the fourth vertical the facial colliculus. Just a quick reminder. This is the facial colliculus, this bump in here. The cause for this bump, you can see it in the slides, is this is the nucleus of the facial nerve, of the seventh cranial nerve. And this is the nucleus of the sixth cranial nerve. You don't need to remember the name of these nerves yet. You do have to remember half an hour from now, but not yet. Anyway, so the fibers that leave the facial nucleus are going around the nucleus of the sixth cranial nerve and do this circle, and these are the ones that cause this bump. So this bump is caused by fibers of the facial nucleus, but beneath the bump is the nucleus of the sixth cranial nerve and not the seventh cranial nerve. So this is called a facial colliculus because there are fibers of the facial nerve, but these nerves are actually around the nucleus of a different cranial nerve. This is what I wanted to show you here. Another section of the pons. So these are pontocerebellar fibers. This is the trigeminal nerve we mentioned. This is the fourth ventricle. So just about the medulla. So this is a section in the open part of the medulla. In the part that has the rhomboid fossa. This is what I call the medullary trigon. The medullary trigon. This is the roof of the ventricle, the inferior medullary velum. You can see the nucleus of the vagal nucleus and the hypoglossal nucleus that makes the vagal trigon and hypoglossal trigon. On the other side, you can see the pyramid, like there was a drawing of it earlier in here. This is the pyramid. The olive, when you cut through the olive, you see that the inferior olivary nucleus has a very unique shape, like this scrambled shape. You see it in the left as well. So this is the olive, the inferior olivary nucleus, and this is the inferior cerebellar peduncle. So these are the same structures, but this is just how they look when we cut through them. And if you make the cut a bit lower, beneath the fourth ventricle, you can see the fasciculus gracilis and the nucleus gracilis and the fasciculus cuneatus and nucleus cuneatus. And in the ventral side, you can again see the pyramid, olive, and inferior cerebellar peduncle. This is from your dissection manual. You can see all these slides. You have all the information, and it's much better visual. You don't like these drawings?
No, not at all.
Not at all.
Not at all.
Yeah, maybe it's time for us to make a new dissection, right? But the best way to look at it is to actually hold the brainstem in your hand and slide it, and then the inner structure will be more understandable. And also you have a different thought about all these tracks. This is why I'm not mentioning it now. And now let me move. It's not a completely different topic. It's just in a different slide. I want to start talking on the cranial nerves. But obviously the cranial nerves has a lot to do with the brainstem. And as I mentioned, the way the central nervous system is connected to the rest of the body is through spinal nerves or cranial nerves. So there are 12 cranial nerves, 12 pairs of cranial nerves that leaves the central nervous system through the cranium. So again, we're already familiar with this drawing, and this drawing shows all the cranial nerves. And I'm just going to give you the names quickly now, and then we'll start and talk about each one of them. Yeah.
You're saying you've done it before, not to the level you may teach us where it is in spine stuff, but when we did head and neck for anatomy, we had memorized the names, so
excellent.
You can go a little quicker.
Excellent. So, olfactory, optic. Did you just memorize the names, or you learned about
locations and the names? We had to.
Excellent.
Yeah.
We can go quickly with this part.
Not from the brainstem, yeah.
Forgot a lot of stuff.
I'm not going to skip on this slide.
It's not that.
And please stop me if it's too fast. The important thing is that everything I'm saying now will be clear, and you'll remember it at least until the test, and hopefully for your entire career as doctor.
Let's not go that far.
Anyway, so these are the names. So the first cranial nerve is the olfactory nerve, and the second cranial nerve is the optic nerve. And these two are unique, because these two are not exactly, they are very different from the other cranial nerve, because they don't belong to the brainstem. The olfactory nerve is part of the telencephalon, it's developed from the telencephalon, and it enters the central nervous system directly to the hemispheres. And the optic nerve is a part of the diencephalon, and it goes directly to the thalamus. And all the other 10 cranial nerves are going inside the midbrain or leave the midbrain. Obviously, the information in the cranial nerves can be both afferent or efferent, inside the midbrain or outside of the brain. The third cranial nerve, the oculomotor nerve, we met him in here. This is the oculomotor nerve. It's coming through the interpeduncular fossa of the midbrain. The trochlear is the only cranial nerve that goes from the dorsal aspect, this thin and long nerve. This is the trochlear nerve. The trigeminal nerve is the big nerve in here. The trigeminal nerve has 3 parts. This is why it is called a trigeminal. It is the 5th cranial nerve. The 6th cranial nerve is the abducens nerve. This one is here. The 7th, the facial nerve. The 8th is the vestibulocochlear. This is why it looks like 2 different nerves. It is one cranial nerve, but it has 2 parts, a vestibular part and the cochlear part. And you know that both information about vestibular information and auditory information goes through the ear, so it makes sense that the vestibular and cochlear part will go together in the ear. So this is the vestibulocochlear nerve. The glossopharyngeal nerve, the 9th cranial nerve is this one, goes between the olive and the inferior medial velum. The valgus, the 10th cranial nerve, is this one, again between the olive and the inferior cerebellar peduncle. This is the accessory cranial nerve. The accessory cranial nerve is also unique because it has a spinous process as well. It goes to the muscles, to the trapezoid, the muscles of the back, and the 12th cranial nerve between the pyramid and the olive, the hypoglossal. So let's give like 3 or 4 minutes for each one of them, maybe a bit less for some of them. So the olfactory nerve. So the olfactory nerve itself is what you see here. It goes from our olfactory organs in the nose to the olfactory bulb. The olfactory bulb is this thing in here. You can see at the bottom of the frontal lobe. Information about odor, about smell, goes through the olfactory nerve to the olfactory bulb, and then goes through the olfactory tract. And then the olfactory tract separates to two strias, two stripes. Lateral olfactory stria and medial olfactory stria. In human, all of the olfactory information goes through the through the lateral stria. And it's not clear what is the role of the medial stria. And the end point of this information is in the primary olfactory cortex. And the primary olfactory cortex is inside this area they call the uncus. Along cover with the parahippocampi. This is the uncus. So olfactory information goes through the olfactory nerve from the nose. It goes to the olfactory bulb, olfactory tract, and lateral olfactory stria towards the uncus. This is the only sense we have out of our senses that doesn't have a stop in the thalamus. It goes directly from the organ to the cortex. Well, not exactly directly, obviously there are synapses in the way, but not through the thalamus. Okay? Between the lateral and medial olfactory stria, there's the anterior perforated substance. If you remember, about 2 hours ago, I mentioned the posterior perforated substance, so there are 2 anterior perforated substances as well, between the lateral and medial olfactory stria. So this is the first cranial nerve. Okay. Now let's go to the second cranial nerve. So just a reminder, the olfactory nerve is a part of the telencephalon. It doesn't go through the brainstem. It goes directly to the olfactory tract that is very close to the frontal lobe, and then to the cortex in the temporal lobe in the uncus. The optic nerve is the second cranial nerve. And the optic nerve obviously comes from the eye, from the retina. Did you learn about the structure of the eye? Yeah, so you're familiar with the structure. So the optic nerve goes from the eye to here. And then, have you seen this kind of diagram before? Excellent. So I'll just go over it quickly, and if there are any questions, let me know. So, like we said about the motor control of the body, our visual system is also contralateral. It's not contralateral by eyes, but by visual field. So my left hemisphere covers the right visual field, and my right hemisphere is in charge on the left visual field. And if you think about the eye, the retina gets information from both visual fields. So the temporal part of the retina gets information from the contralateral visual field, and the nasal part of the retina, the part of the retina that is close to the nose, the nasal or medial part, gets information from the ipsilateral, from the same side of the visual field. So the information on that gets to the right eye gets information from the left visual field. This information is already contralateral in the level of the eye, so it doesn't have to shift to the other side of the brain. This information in red goes through the optic nerve, gets to the optic chiasma and goes through the optic tract. You see here a part of the optic tract. The rest of the optic tract is covered by the temporal lobe. We saw it earlier today. And through the optic tract, this information goes to the lateral geniculate body of the thalamus. The information from the nasal part of the eye came from the same side of the world, the same side of the environment, and this part crosses through the optic chiasma to the other side of the brain, and then travels through the contralateral optic tract to the contralateral lateral geniculate body. So the optic nerve in each side has information from both visual fields. The optic nerve in the right side has, includes information from the right eye, and in here we have information from the left eye. But the optic tract has information not from both visual fields, from one visual field, but from both eyes. Okay? So in here you have information only from the right visual field, from both eyes, and in here we have information from the left visual field from both eyes. Is that clear? You are familiar with that? Then, from the lateral geniculate body, there's something that is not that. They do show it in here. So, a small amount of the information, we said that around 10%, goes from the lateral geniculate body to the superior colliculus. But most of the information travels through the optic radiation to the primary visual cortex. And you can see it in here. Okay, so we mentioned this thing earlier today. And just another thing, another small thing. So the representation of the visual field inside the visual cortex is something we call retinotopic. We say it's retinotopic. So it means that the topography of the information is according to the way the information arrives to the retina. This is retinotopic. Are you familiar with this term? No. Okay. So retinotopic means that the topography is according to the retina. It's the same thing is in the, did we talk about the homunculus?
Yeah.
So when we talk about the sensory cortex or the motor cortex, we say the organization is somatotopic. The topography is according to the soma. So under the same idea, we say retinotopic. So information from the superior field of view goes to the inferior part of the retina. And this information goes to the inferior part of the cortex. And information from the inferior field of view, inferior part of the field of view, goes to the superior part of the cortex. Okay, this is the calcarine sulcus. So the information in here came from this part of the retina and this part of the field of view, and the same from the red part. And the curious, interesting thing about it is that the information from the superior part of the field of view that goes to the inferior part of the cortex, for some reason, the optic radiation doesn't go straight from the lateral geniculate body to the occipital lobe, but does this loop. It goes anteriorly to the temporal lobe, and then goes back to the occipital lobe. It has something to do with the embryonic development of the cortex, the way the temporal lobe is being created, and these fibers are being pulled toward the temporal pole and then goes back. This loop is called Meyer's loop. Meyer's loop. And it causes a very specific phenomena. There are cases in which there is an injury of the temporal lobe, and it causes symptoms to the visual system. So when we think about the visual system, we think about the occipital lobe. But if fibers of Meyer's loop are damaged, you can see visual symptoms after damage to the temporal lobe. And you don't need to, I don't want to talk a lot of time about this slide. I just want to show specific phenomena. So if there's yeah, what's that?
Oh, so I wanted to ask, does Mayer's loop only occur with the inferior retinal input? With the inferior retinal input, or is that superior? Okay, superior.
Superior.
Okay.
It's inferior in the cortex, but it's superior in the visual field. Okay. So if there would be an injury in here, we'll have a very unique blindness of only 1/4 of the visual field. Okay, so both eyes see both
superior visual field.
Both ipsilateral and contralateral visual field. So a damage to the retina or a damage to the optic nerve will cause blindness of the entire eye. Okay? A damage, this is what you can see in this slide. Different locations of damages and what will be the field of view that is being damaged. A damage to the optic tract will cause blindness of an entire visual field, right? And damage to the left optic tract will cause blindness to the right visual field, and vice versa. But if there's a specific damage to Mayer's loop in one hemisphere, the blindness would be only for 1/4 of the visual field. Okay? Only the upper part, because Mayer's loop travels information only for the superior part of the visual field, and only for one side of the visual field because it happens in one hemisphere. Okay? So you can go over this slide later. It's very straightforward, and it's not a talk about the visual system, but I just wanted to mention the nerve.
Was it number 6 on that slide?
So number 6 is a very specific. Number 6 is exactly what I said.
Yeah.
Damage to Mayer's loop. Okay. Yeah. Number 5 is the opposite thing. A damage to the white. It's much more rare. That would be a damage to white matter only in here and not in here. Usually, if you have damage in the occipital lobe, it would be in all of it. But in the temporal lobe, you don't have this blue. Okay. So we can. Any important questions about it? Thing that bothers you, or we can go for it?
Isn't yours just half of what's on?
No, it happens in the other hemispheres as well. But the chances that you have an injury in Mayer's loop in both sides simultaneously is very rare. And if for some reason that happens, that you have this kind of blindness. Okay, but it's obviously very rare. So, after mentioning the first and second cranial nerves, let's go to cranial nerves number 3, 4, and 6. And there's a reason why I'm putting cranial nerve 5 aside. So cranial nerves 3, 4, and 6 are all involved in the movement of the eye. Cranial nerve 5 has a different function, so we'll go back to it later on. So the oculomotor nerve, first of all, so I'm guessing this is something you know better than me because you learned about it. So these are the muscles involved in the movement of the eye. And the oculomotor nerve, the cranial nerve, the third cranial nerve, is in charge of movement of 5 out of the 7 muscles that moves the eye. And you can see the nucleus. For now, I don't want to separate between the red and the green. The nucleus of the oculomotor nerve is very close to the periaqueductal gray I mentioned before. This is a cross section through the midbrain. This is a cerebral aqueduct and periaqueductal gray. This is the nucleus, and the nerves goes through. How do you call this gap? So this is one cerebral peduncle. This is the second. This is the interpeduncular fossa. This is another way of seeing it from here. In the cross section, you can see it goes through the interpedancular fossa. I don't want to elaborate about it. So just mention this, the oculomotor reflex, the light reflex. It's not that that's important to the description of the anatomy. Anyway, this is the trochlear nerve, okay? Also involved in the movement of the eye. And the nucleus of the trochlear nerve is also very close to the periaqueductal gray, but a bit lower. So this is a very similar slice, but a bit lower in the midbrain. So the first one was a slice through the oculomotor, and this is a slice here. And you can see that the trochlear nerve does a very weird thing. It does this circle in order to be contralateral. It does this circle and goes from the dorsal aspect. So as you remember, this is the only cranial nerve that leaves the midbrain from the dorsal aspect, not from the ventral aspect, and then go back to here. This is the trochlear nerve, and the trochlear nerve influences the superior oblique muscle, this muscle, the muscle that moves the eye to the side. Not only to the side, it does the eye something like this, like move the eye something like this. The abducens nerve, the sixth cranial nerve that goes from the out of the brainstem from the pontomedullary sulcus, affects the lateral rectus muscle, and this nerve is in charge on the abduction of the eye. Okay, moving the eye from side to side, and this is just something to say about the coordination of both eyes. So we are able to move the eyes simultaneously to the same side, and this is done but by, did you mention the frontal eye field? So this is a cortical region in the frontal lobe that's involved in eye movement. And just, this is a complicated diagram, but let's make it simple. So these rectangular are the nuclei of the oculomotor nerve in both hemispheres, the third cranial nerve, and these are the nuclei of the sixth cranial nerve, the abducens. I have a colleague that calls the abducens nerve abducix. Just to remember, this is the sixth cranial nerve, so have someone to remember. So this is the sixth cranial nerve, abducens. Anyway, there's a complicated circle. I don't want you to remember all part of it, but the oculomotor, the abducens nerve, affects the lateral rectus muscle, and it causes the eye, when this muscle contracts, it makes the eye go to this side. And there's a circle that causes the medial rectus muscle of the other side to do the same in order for the left eye to be coordinated with the right eye. So there's a circle that each time the frontal eye field affects the abducens to make one eye to go to one side, there are another interneurons in here that cause the oculomotor to do the same effect to the other eye. Okay, this is why we're not moving one eye and the other eye stays in the same in the center position. Okay, so this is what this slide wants to say. So the third, the fourth, and the sixth cranial nerves are all involved in eye movement. Now let's go back to the fifth cranial nerve. So the nomenclature of the cranial nerve, the way they are numbered, is according to the location and not the function. This is why we need to go back to the fifth. So we mentioned the trigeminal nerve. The trigeminal nerve is the border between the basilar part of pons and the middle cerebellar peduncle. And the trigeminal nerve is built out of it has three subdivisions. It has an ophthalmic part, a maxillary part, and the mandibular part. Each one of them brings sensation from different parts of the head. So the ophthalmic part brings back sensation from this region of the face, the maxillary from the yellow part, and the mandibular from the green part. And you're already familiar with the names of the bones of the skull, right? So the one is the ophthalmic bone, maxillary bone, and mandibular bone. Okay? So these are the three parts of the trigeminal. This is why it's called the trigeminal. Okay? We can see it by eye, the three different parts, but each one of them brings sensation from a different part of the skull. In addition to the sensory, so maybe let me say something general for the beginning. So the spinal nerve have a very nerves have a very specific division. They have a dorsal root leaving the spinal cord with sensory information, and they have a ventral root with motor information. So if you look at the, we have it, yeah. So it looks something like this. So there's a dorsal root and the ventral root. This is motor information going to the muscle. This is dorsal information coming from the periphery. This is a sensory and dorsal information coming from the periphery. You'll have a different lesson about it. There's a ganglion in here, never mind for now, and they are both joined to a mixed spinal nerve. So a spinal nerve has both sensory information and motor information. And the sensory information comes from the from the dorsal root, and the motor information comes from the ventral root. In the cranial nerves, it's not the same. In the cranial nerves, some of the nerves are sensory, some of them are only motor, some of them have mixture of motor and sensation. They have different nuclei, and it's more complicated. So the ophthalmic and maxillary parts of the trigeminal nerve are purely sensory. But the mandibular nerve, besides bringing information, sensory information from the areas of the mandibular bone, from the bottom third of the face, it also has a motor function, a motor ingredient in it. So in the same nerve, it is possible for both sensory information and motor information to move, like two different lanes in a road. Okay? So the motor function of the mandibular nerve is in moving the muscles, the chewing muscle, the muscle we use to chew food. Okay? Is that clear? Excellent. So let's move to the seventh cranial nerve. So we did 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, went back to 5. Now we're going according to order to set to the seventh nerve. So the seventh cranial nerve is the facial nerve. The facial nerve is mainly motor. This is the nerve that is involved in moving our facial muscles. And we can see the nerve in here. So the facial nerve is one of the three nerves that goes through the pontomedullary sulcus. This was the abducens. This is the facial nerve. I already mentioned the facial colliculus that is caused by the fibers doing this circle around the nucleus of the abducens nerve. It is mainly motor, and it also involved in bringing taste from the posterior part of the tongue. Okay? So taste from the posterior part of the tongue comes from the motor nerve, and it also has parasympathetic function. I don't want to elaborate about this. That's not that important for now. So this was the facial nerve. The eighth cranial nerve is the vestibulocochlear nerve, the one in here that has a vestibular and cochlear functions, goes in brings information from the ear about the vestibular system and about hearing. The 9th cranial nerve, so now we left the frontomedullary sulcus and went to this gap between the olive and the inferior medullary velum. The glossopharyngeal nerve, like his name, like the name, is involved in the glossa, in the tongue, and in the pharynx, in the pharynx. So it has motor supply to the pharynx. It brings sensation, general sensation and taste from the posterior part of the tongue. So I said it backwards about the facial nerve. So the facial nerve brings information, taste information from the anterior part of the tongue, and the glossopharyngeal from the back of the tongue. Okay, both general sensation and taste. General sensation from the anterior part of the tongue goes through the trigeminal. Okay, we mentioned the trigeminal in here. So just the sensation of touch on the anterior part of the tongue will go through the trigeminal. But the back part of the tongue is going through the glossopharyngeal. The 10th cranial nerve, the vagal nerve, is mainly involved in parasympathetic control, mainly in affecting the heart and affect the gut. So this is the 10th cranial nerve. The
Yeah, it smells like
cranial
gas.
nerve. Is everything okay?
It smells like gas.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ooh, that's a heavy leak. Wow.
Check with the supervisor for a second. So let's take just a 2 minutes break, okay? It's not right away, I just want to check with the supervisor.
No, the superior. Then you changed it. What? Why is everyone here?
We still have another one.
We have another lecture?
It goes till 1, so have to do the whole ventricular system.
Somebody light a lighter and see.
What? I thought we're done.
Where is pathology in this classroom?
Yeah.
What's the What is this one about? It's acute inflammation and then what?
Chronic
inflammation. What about warm feeling? Oh, that's next. So good. I don't need that.
I'm just spacing out.
Yo, so what's the general consensus for farm? How do you do it if sketch is not the way?
Lippincott?
I can't read Lippincott.
Lippincott and
Kaplan?
Kaplan. Kaplan's pretty good, but there are things in Lippincott that doesn't cover.
It doesn't what?
It doesn't cover. But Kaplan is really good to like the low frequency.
Really?
Yeah, I've been doing that.
Where'd you get that data from? It's not
I
the
actually
back
do it
end.
like everything now.
You're doing both?
Yeah. Oh, you went to Aroma?
And
I
also
love
do
those
Kaplan,
ones at Roma, those ones with the chocolate on the inside.
Yeah, this is good. I think you there is no gas in the building, so you can't do that.
Okay, we're almost finished.
Yeah, we have an opera singer in our class.
You know how to control the air conditioning?
אתה יכול לכבות את המזגן?
יכול להיות שהמזגן שואב מאיפשהו אוויר בוא נסגור לכמה דקות את המזגן. So I close the air conditioning for
Okay. Don't wait for that. It's okay. Don't wait for that.
So averaging your average
Someone told him, guys, we're starting. The video system is, we can do it very shortly, but we do need to cover it.
It's fine.
11, 12, and we already studied the.
Wait, Adam, the facial nerve is the posterior part of the tongue? The anterior 2/3 of the tongue.
Why didn't you post it?
The other way around.
No, it still smells.
It's
Yeah,
not.
but
It's not
air conditioning and they're going to.
Don't worry.
So we just
Don't worry,
need to
it'll
open
just
the
get
door
hot.
and- Sorry about that. Close together.